Imagine for a moment that genius isn't a type of person, but a way of thinking. Many people believe they were born with a brain bad at learning, as if the mind came with a permanent factory label. But that's just the snapshot of a brain that got used to working in only one way, usually a lazy, automatic way, untrained for deep thinking. The good news? The brain is plastic, highly plastic, a living muscle that reorganizes itself when we demand more from it. Neuroplasticity, that elegant word that sounds like it came from a futuristic lab, basically says, if you train me, I change. It doesn't matter your age, academic history, or how many traumatic report cards you have from the past. The mind learns to learn, and that means intelligence, focus, and depth aren't destiny, they're practice. But here's a detail almost no one tells you. Reprogramming the way you think takes time, months, maybe years. But the difference is, when it changes, it really changes. And that's what transforms someone ordinary into the type of person who understands quickly, connects ideas, solves problems, and learns without suffering. To start, we need to answer, what exactly makes someone seem like a genius? Usually, two things stand out. Off-the-charts memory. It's not magic. It's the result of how information was encoded the first time. A bad memory almost always comes from a bad first contact. Deep understanding. The ability to take an idea and work with it like it's clay, twist it, compare it, test it, apply it, transform it. The combination of these two factors creates the myth of the genius. But behind the myth, there's only method, and method can be learned. Now get ready, because we're going to dive into the internal engineering of this so-called deep understanding and reveal why most people don't think, they just repeat. Most people believe they've understood something simply because they recognized the words. But recognizing isn't understanding. It's just familiarity disguised as intelligence. The brain loves this trick. It shows you information. You think, oh, I know this, and boom. The mind closes the book before even really opening it. It's like seeing the cover of an airplane manual and thinking you can already fly. This kind of superficial thinking creates an illusion of knowledge that, deep down, prevents real learning. Deep understanding is born when you force your mind to explain, not just repeat. This is where the game changes. Explaining is dismantling an idea and reassembling it with your own pieces. It's transforming information into structure. When you explain something in your own words, the mind is forced to use real cognitive energy, and this activates the neural networks that consolidate memory, reasoning, and clarity. It's like switching from a weak flashlight to a spotlight. You see angles that weren't visible before. But there's another extremely dangerous cognitive trap: automatic thinking. The brain loves shortcuts because they save energy. But mental shortcuts are like trying to learn math using only magic tricks. They seem to work for a while until you encounter a real problem and everything collapses. Thinking deeply requires effort and slowing down. It's the moment when you tell your brain, hold on, let's understand this properly. And that's when the miracle begins. But effort alone isn't enough. You need to ask the right question. The question that activates insight. The question that forces your brain to leave the surface. And that question is simple. Why is this true? This has been found repeatedly in studies on learning and appears as a critical mechanism for converting curiosity into solid understanding. When you ask why, your mind is pushed into the internal engineering of the idea. It's like opening the box and looking at the engine inside. You separate cause and effect, understand relationships, identify what matters, and discard what doesn't. It's a type of thinking that transforms an average student into someone capable of creating, improvising, and innovating. Another powerful practice is testing whether you really understood something by trying to apply it in a different context. If the idea only works in the original example, you memorized, you didn't learn. But if you can move the concept to another scenario, twist it a bit, adapt it, play with it, then your mind starts operating in genius mode. And here comes an important, almost amusing detail. The brain doesn't like to think deeply, but it loves the feeling of having understood something deeply. It's like climbing a mountain, tiring during, satisfying after. The difference is that when you really think, this after transforms everything. Memory improves, focus improves, reasoning improves, even your confidence changes. Now that you understand the danger of automatic thinking and the power of explaining, asking, and applying, let's move to the next layer: how to transform curiosity into a permanent learning engine. Curiosity isn't just a pleasant feeling, it's a biological force, a survival mechanism that pushes the brain to solve mysteries. But there's a secret here. Curiosity doesn't arise from what you already know, but from what you almost know. The mind gets hooked when it perceives a small gap, something within your reach but still outside your domain. It's the famous, "I almost got it." This gray zone is the spark that transforms interest into deep attention. And here's the crucial point. You can create this spark deliberately. How? By asking questions that create cognitive tension. Not anxiety, but that slight discomfort that makes the brain want to complete a pattern. Questions like, what am I missing? Which part of this still doesn't make sense? Or, if this were false, why would it be? Push your mind into an activity it normally avoids. Real investigation. When you investigate, the brain lights up areas connected to motivation, memory, and reward, and learning accelerates. But there's something even more interesting. Curiosity multiplies when you transform knowledge into a mental game. For example, trying to predict the next part of a concept before reading it, or trying to answer a question before seeing the answer. Neuroscience shows that when you try to guess something, even if you're wrong, your brain activates learning areas much more strongly than when you just receive information ready-made. Mistakes, in fact, are fuel for sophisticated learning. They create contrast, and contrast creates clarity. Another essential aspect is allowing yourself to play with ideas. Many people think serious reasoning requires rigidity, but the greatest insights come when you allow your mind to make unlikely connections. Playing intellectually is an elegant way of telling the brain, look for new patterns, and when it looks, it finds. But this play has one rule. You need to feel free to make mistakes. Without this freedom, the brain becomes defensive, rigid, trying to seem right instead of trying to understand. And here's the key that transforms curiosity into permanent skill. You must learn to fall in love with the question, not the answer. Answers are static. Questions are expansive. When you cultivate good questions, you create an internal engine that keeps running even after the video, class, or conversation ends. This is how genius minds operate. They don't accumulate answers, they manufacture irresistible questions. Now that you understand how to activate curiosity and convert it into real learning, we're ready to enter the region where genius really begins. The brain doesn't learn in large blocks, it learns in strategic fragments. The human mind wasn't made to absorb large blocks of information at once. It was made to break the world into small, manageable, meaningful pieces. When you try to learn something huge all at once, your brain goes into protection mode. It freezes, disperses, pushes everything away. But when you present content in smart fragments, almost like puzzle pieces, the brain does exactly the opposite. It approaches, organizes, and connects. Imagine this. Each piece of information is like a knot. The brain doesn't want to keep loose knots. It wants to tie them to each other to form a network. The more connections, the stronger the learning. That's why a powerful secret for training your mind like a brilliant mind is to fragment ideas until they become inevitable. When something is inevitable, the brain doesn't fight, it accepts. This is where an elegant technique comes in, the micro-block method. Instead of studying for 1 hour, you study for 5 minutes, but 5 minutes with intensity, clarity, and absolute focus on just one point. In this micro-block, you ask yourself, what's the essence? And what does this really mean? 5 well-used minutes are worth more than 50 poorly distributed minutes. The brain learns in focus, not in brute effort. Another essential principle is repetition with variation. Repeating exactly the same is boring for the brain, and everything boring gets erased. But when you repeat an idea by slightly changing the context, the brain registers it as something alive, relevant, applicable. That's why great masters explain the same thing in multiple ways. They don't repeat because they forgot. They repeat because they want you to remember. And here's a powerful image. Learning is like illuminating a dark room with a flashlight. With each small sweep of light, you see more details. You don't turn on all the lights at once. You explore. Genius is in the movement, not in the volume. Finally, there's a serious mistake that prevents thousands of people from learning well. They try to memorize before understanding. It's like trying to build walls without a foundation. When you understand, memory forms naturally. When you memorize, it evaporates. The right fragment, repeated the right way, with active curiosity, creates a mind that doesn't just learn, but transforms what it learns into powerful clarity. And now we're ready to explore something deep. How to transform this knowledge into real reasoning. The kind of thinking that solves problems, creates ideas, and sees patterns invisible to most. Reasoning well isn't thinking more, it's thinking better. Most people think intelligence is a brute force of the mind, a kind of hidden muscle. But truly powerful thinking doesn't come from effort. It comes from internal organization. A trained mind doesn't desperately chase answers. It creates pathways. Imagine that each problem is a closed box. The common mind tries to break open the box. The brilliant mind first tries to understand the shape of the lock. It doesn't waste energy, it directs energy. And reasoning is that, direction. One of the most elegant principles for training this kind of thinking is the mother question technique. Every complex question can be reduced to a simple question that organizes the chaos. You ask questions like, what's really happening here? What's the essential part of this? What do I need to ignore to understand? The mind gains clarity not when it adds more information, but when it removes noise. Another fundamental point, you only truly understand something when you can explain it with simple words. Not simple because you're limited, simple because you're deep. Complication is a disguise for confusion. Simplicity is the mark of comprehension. When your brain translates an idea to its most essential form, it's as if it's drawing an internal map. And a clear map is always more useful than a foggy landscape. Here's a powerful analogy. Thinking is like tuning an instrument. If you tune string by string, sound by sound, the music flows. If you try to play with everything out of tune, it becomes noise. So whenever your mind gets stuck, stop and tune a single string. Redefine focus. Formulate a central question. Eliminate an irrelevant detail. A tuned mind produces insights with little effort, almost as if it's hearing the answer instead of manufacturing it. And there's still a secret that few understand. Thinking is a physical art. Ideas only align when you get them out of your head. Speak out loud, draw, write scribbles, trace arrows. The mind is brilliant, but it's a terrible place to store loose thoughts. When you externalize, the brain frees up space and starts to see invisible relationships. Insight comes because you gave it space to be born. When you master this way of thinking, something powerful happens. Problems stop being monsters and become mechanisms. And when you understand the mechanism, you control the outcome. Now that you master clarity, let's advance to an even more sophisticated point. How to transform knowledge and reasoning into real creativity. That rare ability to see solutions where no one else is looking. Creativity isn't a magical talent reserved for geniuses. It's a specific way of combining information. The common mind looks for answers within the obvious. The creative mind takes pieces no one imagined together and builds something new. And when you learn this process, your mind starts producing ideas like breathing. The first key to creativity is accepting a simple fact. Your mind hates empty, so it fills spaces. If you create the right space, it fills with solutions. But if you live squeezed by anxiety, haste, and excess stimulation, it only fills with noise. Creativity is silence where a flash is. That's why moments of pause, shower, walk, coffee, looking out the window are hidden laboratories of the brain. While you think you're not thinking, your mind is connecting wires that were previously separate. But it's not enough to wait for the flash. Creative insight is an active process, almost engineering. First you collect pieces, then you dismantle, then you recombine. A simple and powerful way to do this is to ask, what if I do the opposite? What if this works without this part? What element can I steal from another area and put here? The world's most creative minds don't invent from scratch. They transplant ideas. And here comes one of the most elegant techniques for training the mind like a genius: cognitive contrast. When you compare two distant ideas, physics and cooking, music and math, art and engineering, your mind creates bridges. And it's on these bridges that unique solutions are born. The more varied your repertoire, the more powerful your capacity for invention. A narrow mind creates little. A broad mind creates world. There's also an essential detail that almost no one understands. Creativity requires courage. Yes, courage, because every new idea seems silly before it seems brilliant. And whoever fears embarrassment never accesses their true creative potential. Fear blocks the flow. Curiosity releases it. The creative mind is the mind that allows itself to fail fast, test fast, adjust fast. Creating is playing with the unknown until it becomes familiar. And the most beautiful point of all, creativity isn't about being different. It's about being perceptibly useful. A genius idea isn't the most exotic. It's the one that solves something elegantly. Creativity is functional aesthetics. It's when the solution is so good it seems simple. But it only seems that way because you did the hard work of really thinking. Now that you master reasoning and creativity, let's enter the territory that separates common minds from extraordinary minds. How to transform knowledge, clarity, and creativity into real skill. The ability to learn anything quickly. Learning fast isn't a gift, it's method. And the method starts with a simple question that almost no one has the courage to ask. What exactly didn't I understand? It seems obvious, but observe. Most people fake comprehension to protect the ego, when precisely the act of admitting failure is what opens space for real understanding. The mind that learns isn't the one that seems intelligent, but the one that allows itself to investigate without shame. Accelerated learning works like assembling a puzzle. You don't need all the pieces to see the image, just the right pieces. That's why the trick is to locate the key points, the invisible structures that support everything else. When you understand the mechanism behind the phenomenon, you learn 10 times faster. It's like discovering the magician's trick. After you see it, you never unsee it. And here's a detail that changes everything. Asking is smarter than answering. Each well-made question stretches the brain, forces clarity, and reveals shortcuts. So think now. Really think. What subject in your life haven't you mastered yet because you never asked the right question about it? Hold that reflection for a moment. The ability to learn also depends on the skill of breaking complex subjects into smaller, chewable blocks. The most common mistake is trying to understand everything at once and drowning the brain. Don't do that. Instead ask, what's the smallest part of this I can understand now, and then build on top. A brilliant mind doesn't run, it stacks. But none of this works if you don't apply the maximum rule of learning. Teach to understand. When you explain something in your own words, the brain is forced to organize the idea, detect holes, correct flaws. Each explanation is a workout. Each explanation makes you sharper. The more you teach, the more you learn, even if no one's listening. Now, I want you to do something for yourself. What skill have you been postponing learning because it seems too difficult? Write it in the comments. Yes, write it. I read all of them. Absolutely all of them. And if you leave your difficulty there, I can help you dismantle that skill into simple, clear steps that finally make sense. Because the truth is this, the distance between you and your next great competency isn't talent, it's method, and you're learning the method. By this point, you've realized an exceptional mind isn't born ready. It's built, piece by piece, decision by decision. And the most interesting thing is that after you change the way you think, the world starts to change with it. Not because it got easier, but because you got clearer, sharper, more capable. The brain loves whoever challenges it with kindness, loves when you ask better questions, loves when you break big problems into small parts, loves when you explain something out loud as if illuminating your own darkness. That's the real training. That's the secret that separates those who want to learn from those who actually learn. And if you got this far, that already says something powerful about you. Your mind wants to grow. And when a mind wants to grow, nothing holds it back. Now I want to make you a direct invitation. What was the biggest insight you had today? Write it in the comments. I read all of them, and I respond whenever I can. Sometimes a single sentence from you gives me the chance to guide you on the right path. If this video helped you, provoked you, or made you think, then do this now. Like the video, because this takes this message to other people who need it as much as you do. And if you want to continue training your mind with me, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, each video is designed to expand your thinking, accelerate your learning, and bring you closer to your best version. Not the perfect version, but the possible version, built day after day. Thank you for being here. Now go out there and use your mind, not as a spectator, but as the author of your own thinking. See you in the next video.
Here's something curious. Watch a 3-year-old for an hour. They ask why about everything. Why is the sky blue? Why do birds fly? Why does water make things wet? They're not studying. They're not preparing for a test. They're just interested. They want to know how things work. Now watch an adult trying to learn something new. Maybe they're reading a textbook, or watching an educational video, or sitting in a training session. Notice something? Often there's this look, a kind of tension. The jaw is set. The focus is intense, but not in a joyful way. It's the focus of someone doing something difficult, something they have to get through. What happened between age 3 and age 30? Because here's the thing. The human brain is actually built for learning. It's what it does best. Every moment it's taking in information, making connections, building patterns. You learn to recognize your mother's face. You learned language, one of the most complex systems humans have ever created, before you could even tie your shoes. You figured out how to walk, which requires calculating thousands of tiny muscle movements and balance adjustments, and you did it without a manual. So if learning is natural, if it's something the brain does automatically, why does it feel so hard? Why do so many people say they hate learning? The answer is simple. They don't hate learning. They hate something else that's been disguised as learning. Think about what happens when you're genuinely curious about something. Let's say you're trying to figure out why your car is making a strange noise. You're not following a curriculum. You're not memorizing facts. You're investigating. You listen carefully to the sound. You think about what parts of the car could create that noise. Maybe you look under the hood. You might ask someone who knows about engines. You might read something online. But notice, you are pulling information toward yourself. You have a question and you want an answer. This is learning in its natural form. It starts with curiosity, with not knowing something and wanting to know it. The wanting part is crucial. The brain is designed to find satisfaction in figuring things out. There's actually a small chemical reward every time you make a connection, every time something clicks into place. It's the same system that makes puzzles satisfying to solve, that makes mysteries compelling to read. But now think about typical education. Someone else decides what you should learn. They decide when you should learn it. They break it down into pieces and give you piece number 1, whether you're curious about it or not. Then they test you to see if you retain piece number 1 before moving you to piece number 2. The sequence is fixed. The pace is fixed. The material is fixed. And here's what's crucial. The questions aren't yours. When you learn something because someone told you that you need to know it, something fundamental changes. The brain's natural curiosity mechanism isn't engaged. Instead, you're using a different system, the one related to obligation, to avoiding negative consequences, to doing what you're supposed to do. This system works to some extent. People can force themselves to memorize things, to study things they don't care about. But it's effortful, it's draining, and the information doesn't stick the same way. There's a simple test for this. Think back to school. Now, try to remember the quadratic formula, or the date of some historical treaty you had to memorize, or the definition of mitosis versus meiosis. For most people, this information is gone. Not because their memory is bad, but because they never really learned it. They temporarily stored it just long enough to pass a test, and then the brain quite sensibly threw it away. Why would it keep information that has no connection to anything, that answers no question you actually have? Now think about something you learned because you wanted to know it. Maybe it's how to play a song on an instrument, or the rules of a game you enjoy, or how to cook a specific dish, or the details of a historical event you found fascinating. That information is still there, isn't it? Even years later. Because when you learned it, you were actually learning, not just storing facts temporarily. The difference isn't in the subject matter. It's in the relationship between the person and the information. Here's an analogy that might help. Imagine you're hungry, and someone makes you food you actually want to eat. Maybe it's your favorite dish. You eat it, you enjoy it, your body processes it, and you're nourished. Now imagine someone forces you to eat something you find disgusting. You might be able to choke it down, but it's unpleasant, and your body might even reject it. Same basic process, eating, but completely different experiences. Learning works the same way. When the brain wants information, when there's genuine curiosity, it absorbs that information easily. The neural pathways are ready. There's attention, not forced attention, but natural attention, the kind that happens when you're interested. When the brain doesn't want the information, when it's being forced in, everything is harder. Attention drifts, retention is poor, understanding is shallow. So what makes the difference? What creates genuine curiosity? The answer is surprisingly simple: questions. Real learning starts with a question. Not a question someone else asked you, but a question you actually have. Why does that work that way? What would happen if? How does this connect to that? The question creates a kind of tension in the mind. You know there's an answer, and you want to resolve the tension by finding it. This is why children learn so effortlessly. They're full of questions. Everything is new, so everything prompts a why or a how. They haven't learned to suppress their curiosity yet. They haven't learned that asking questions might make them look stupid, or that some questions aren't worth asking, or that they should just memorize what they're told. Adults still have this capacity. It's not gone, but it gets buried under years of being told what to learn and how to learn it. Many people have been trained quite thoroughly to see learning as something that happens to them, not something they do for themselves. Watch what happens when an adult becomes genuinely interested in something. Maybe they decide they want to learn how to bake bread. Suddenly, they're researching flour types, understanding gluten development, experimenting with hydration ratios. They're watching videos, reading articles, trying things out. They might spend hours on this, and they don't experience it as studying. It's just interesting. They have questions, and they're finding answers. Or consider someone who gets interested in how something went wrong. A bridge collapsed, or a company failed, or a historical event unfolded in an unexpected way. If they're genuinely curious, they'll dig into it. They'll want to understand the mechanism, the chain of causes and effects. And in the process, they'll learn all sorts of things: engineering principles, economic factors, human psychology, without it feeling like work. The subject doesn't matter. What matters is whether there's a real question driving the learning. Now, here's where it gets interesting. You can actually cultivate this. You can learn how to learn in a way that's natural and enjoyable. It's not complicated, but it requires a shift in how you approach new information. First, start with what you're actually curious about, not with what you think you should learn. If you're interested in why certain movies are scary, that's a legitimate starting point. You might end up learning about psychology, about visual composition, about sound design, about pacing and narrative structure. All of that is real knowledge, but you got there through genuine interest, not through obligation. Second, follow your questions, not someone else's curriculum. Let's say you're curious about how airplanes fly. You might start with a simple explanation, but then you might wonder, what exactly is lift? That leads you to air pressure. Then maybe you wonder why air pressure works that way, which leads you to molecular motion. Or maybe you get curious about why wings are shaped the way they are, which leads you to fluid dynamics. Each answer creates new questions. This is natural. This is how understanding deepens. The traditional approach would be, here's chapter 1 on basic aerodynamics. Memorize these terms, take a quiz, then move to chapter 2. But that's backward. It starts with answers and hopes you'll develop questions. Natural learning starts with questions and pulls in answers. Third, use your own understanding, not memorization. When you're trying to learn something, the goal isn't to be able to repeat information. It's to understand it well enough that you could explain it in your own words, using your own analogies. If you can't do that, you don't really understand it yet, you've just memorized some words. This is actually a powerful test. Take any concept you think you understand and try to explain it to someone who knows nothing about it without using any jargon. If you can do that, you understand it. If you can't, you've identified where your understanding is shallow. That's not a failure, that's useful information. Now you know what question to ask next. Fourth, make connections. The brain doesn't store information in isolation. It stores it as part of a network. Every piece of information connects to other pieces. When you learn something new, actively think about how it relates to things you already know. Does it explain something you've observed? Does it contradict something you thought was true? Does it work the same way as something in a completely different domain? These connections are what make information stick. They're also what make learning enjoyable. There's real satisfaction in seeing how things fit together, and having those aha moments when you realize two different concepts are actually related. Fifth, accept confusion as part of the process. When you're genuinely learning something, there's always a period of not understanding. This is normal. It's not a sign that you're bad at learning or that the subject is too hard. It's just what happens when you encounter something new. The brain needs time to build the right mental structures. The problem is that traditional education punishes confusion. If you don't understand something quickly, you fall behind, you get poor grades, you feel stupid. So people learn to avoid confusion, to stick to things they already know, to never venture into genuine uncertainty. But real learning requires being comfortable with temporary confusion. It's the space between not knowing and knowing. You can't skip it. Here's what's fascinating. When you approach learning this way, starting with curiosity, following your questions, seeking understanding rather than memorization, it doesn't feel like work. It feels like play, like solving a puzzle, like exploring. And the information sticks, not because you drilled it into your memory, but because you understand it. Understanding is its own kind of memory. You don't have to remember Newton's third law. If you actually understand the principle, you can recreate it because it makes sense. This is why children learn so much so quickly. They're not studying. They're playing. They're experimenting. They're asking questions and finding answers. And they're doing it all day, every day, without it being exhausting, because their curiosity is engaged. The tragedy is that the educational system often trains this out of people. By the time someone is an adult, they might believe that learning is supposed to be hard, that it requires discipline and willpower, that some people are just good at learning and others aren't. But that's like saying some people are good at being hungry and others aren't. Everyone's brain wants to learn. That's what it does. The question is whether you're feeding it questions it actually wants answers to, or trying to force feed it information it has no use for. Think about the last time you fell down a rabbit hole online. You started looking up one thing, and 3 hours later you're reading about something completely different, having followed a chain of interesting connections. That's learning. Effortless, enjoyable learning. You weren't forcing yourself to pay attention. Attention happened naturally because you were curious. Now imagine if someone had handed you a textbook covering all those topics and told you to study it for a test. Same information, but completely different experience. The mechanism here is worth understanding. The human brain has limited resources for forced attention, for making yourself focus on something you're not interested in. This is willpower, and it depletes. After a few hours of forced study, you're exhausted. But curiosity-driven attention is different. It doesn't deplete the same way. You can follow your curiosity for hours and feel energized rather than drained. This has enormous implications. It means that the traditional approach to learning, forcing yourself through material you're not interested in, is not just unpleasant, it's inefficient. You're using the wrong mental mechanism. It's like trying to move a heavy object by pushing it uphill instead of rolling it downhill. Here's a useful thought experiment. Imagine you could learn anything you wanted, but you couldn't get a degree in it, it wouldn't help your career, and no one would ever test you on it. What would you choose to learn? Most people have immediate answers to this question. Oh, I'd love to understand quantum mechanics. I'd learn to play piano. I'd study the history of ancient Rome. I'd figure out how the brain works. There are all these things people are genuinely curious about, but they don't pursue them because they seem impractical, or because learning has become associated with obligation rather than curiosity. But here's the thing. The mechanism of learning is the same whether you're learning something practical or not. If you can reawaken that natural curiosity, if you can make learning feel like following your interests rather than fulfilling obligations, you'll learn practical things better too. Let's say you need to learn statistics for work. The traditional approach, get a textbook, start at chapter 1, force yourself through it. The curiosity approach, start with a question you actually have. Maybe you want to understand why polls are sometimes wrong, or how doctors determine if a treatment works, or what people mean when they say a result is statistically significant. Start there. Follow your genuine curiosity. You'll end up learning the statistics you need, but you'll understand it better because you pulled it in rather than having it pushed on you. This works for anything. You want to learn a language? Don't start with grammar drills. Start with something you're actually interested in, maybe a movie, or music, or articles about a topic you care about. You'll be confused at first, but you'll be motivated to figure out what's being said. Grammar will make sense because you have a context for it, a reason to care about the difference between this verb tense and that one. The principle is universal. Start with a real question, with genuine curiosity, and let that pull you into the learning. Now, there's an objection that comes up here. What about things you need to know but aren't naturally curious about? What about requirements, prerequisites, things you have to learn whether you're interested or not? This is a real issue, but it's often overstated. First, there's usually a way to connect required knowledge to something you are curious about. If you need to learn calculus, maybe you're not interested in derivatives as abstract concepts, but you might be interested in how things change over time, how a population grows, how a rocket accelerates, how medicine spreads through the body. Find that connection, and suddenly calculus is the tool that helps you understand something you care about. Second, even when you can't find that connection, understanding how learning actually works is useful. you can at least avoid the most inefficient approaches. Don't just read and reread the same information. Don't highlight endlessly. Don't copy notes you don't understand. Instead, test yourself. Try to explain it. Find what confuses you and focus there. Even if you're not naturally curious about the material, you can use techniques that work with your brain rather than against it. But third, and most important, most learning in life is optional. People don't realize this. After formal education ends, you get to choose what you learn. And even during formal education, there's enormous room for following your own interests within and beyond the curriculum. The real issue is that many people have learned to suppress their curiosity so thoroughly that they don't even know what they're interested in anymore. They've learned to think of learning as a chore, as something done for external reasons, to get a grade, to get a job, to meet a requirement. But curiosity is still there. It's waiting. Ask someone about a topic they find fascinating and watch what happens. Their whole demeanor changes. They lean forward. They speak faster. Their eyes light up. They want to share what they understand, to explore what they don't yet understand. That's the natural state. That's what learning looks like when it's working right. So if learning feels like pulling teeth, if it's exhausting and unrewarding, that's not a sign that you're bad at learning. It's a sign that you're approaching it wrong. You're trying to force-feed yourself information your brain has no particular reason to want. The solution isn't to try harder with the same approach. It's to change the approach, to start with questions you actually have, to follow your genuine curiosity, to learn because you want to understand, not because you're supposed to know. When you do this, learning transforms. It becomes something you look forward to rather than something you have to make yourself do. Understanding becomes its own reward. The process becomes enjoyable. And here's the beautiful irony. When learning becomes enjoyable, when you're following genuine curiosity, you actually learn more. You understand more deeply. You retain information better. You make more connections. Not because you're trying harder, but because you're working with your brain's natural mechanisms rather than against them. The 3-year-old asking why about everything isn't working hard at learning. They're just curious. And in a few short years, driven purely by that curiosity, they'll master language, develop sophisticated reasoning, build complex models of how the world works, all without textbooks, without tests, without anyone making them study. That capacity doesn't go away as you get older. It just gets buried under expectations, under obligations, under the accumulated weight of years of being told what to learn and how to learn it. But it's still there, still waiting, still ready to make learning what it should be. Not a chore, not an obligation, but a natural expression of the simple fact that the human brain wants to understand the world. The question isn't whether you can enjoy learning. The question is whether you're willing to learn the way your brain actually wants to learn, starting with curiosity, following questions, seeking understanding, rather than the way you were taught that learning is supposed to happen. If you're not enjoying learning, you're not doing it wrong because you lack discipline or intelligence. You're doing it wrong because you're using the wrong mechanism. You're trying to force something that works better when you let it flow naturally. The solution is simpler than you think. Find something you're genuinely curious about. Start there. Follow the questions that emerge. Let understanding build naturally. And notice how different it feels when learning is something you want to do rather than something you have to do. That's not a trick or a technique. That's just learning the way it's meant to work.
The secret isn't forcing memorization. It's lighting a child's curiosity. Every word you say, every gesture, every how you offer can repair or build a bridge in their brain. Curiosity isn't a small detail of genius. It's the root. It's where big ideas, world-changing projects, and human progress begin. Learning quickly and easily almost always connects to genuine interest. A person who's obsessed and takes pleasure in what they do learns far faster than someone who sees no point in it. Here's the key. To turn a child into someone who learns for pleasure, not obligation, follow 3 simple principles. Simplify any topic, make learning fun, and listen with the same intensity with which you teach. The method I'm proposing follows that path exactly. First, choose an image or an object that tells a story. Second, describe that story in very simple language, the way you'd speak to a 7-year-old. Third, ask the child to explain it back in their own words, without fear, without immediate correction. Here's the power. When a child tries to explain, they organize their thinking, reveal gaps, and form links between what they see and what they feel. When you correct, don't say, "That's wrong." Correct with a new example, a mini experiment, or a concrete gesture. And always celebrate the attempt, not just the right answer. That builds courage. Without courage, there is no deep learning. Now let's put this into practice. Imagine teaching fractions with cookies. Take 6 cookies, or pieces of paper, place them in front of the child and say, "Let's divide a treasure." Ask them to make 2 equal piles. Watch. If they hesitate, ask, "How do you know they're equal?" Let them explain. If their explanation fails, don't give the answer. Show 2 piles and ask them to swap 1 cookie between the piles so they can feel the difference. Then ask them to tell the story of what happened in their own words. When they say, "One got bigger," turn the phrasing back to their perspective. Yes, when we swapped a cookie, that pile got bigger. Why do you think that happened? That pushes argumentation and language. For new vocabulary, use the same tactic. Image plus phrase in the child's native language plus acting it out. Then ask them to teach it to you. At first it's translation, then independence follows. She'll start thinking in the new word without translating. Create micro-routines of 10 to 20 minutes that always end with the child saying, "Teach me." For example, 10 minutes of picture reading, 5 minutes to draw the story, and 5 minutes to explain it to you, without looking at the book. In each session, ask only 2 key questions. What did you understand? And how would you explain this to John? Using a friend's name forces simplicity. Use role play. Turn the child into the teacher for 3 minutes. Give them an imaginary blackboard, ask them to explain, then follow up with genuine curiosity. That simple game builds autonomy and creates a repetition rhythm that locks the mental structure in place without boredom. Never underestimate the power of tone. The words you use when you correct shape a child's identity. Instead of "you're wrong," try "interesting. Tell me again how you got to that." Swap wrong for not yet. Small phrases make huge emotional repairs. The same goes for praise. Instead of "good job," say, "I see you tried X and noticed Y." That shows your brain is connecting ideas. That teaches process, not outcome. When a child says, "This is hard," turn it into an operation. Which part is hard? Pick one word: confused, long, boring. And let's sketch a single step to fix that. You're teaching metacognition, thinking about thinking. Metacognition is what separates repeaters from masters. Bring movement and multisensory experience in. Walk around while you explain. Draw in the air with your finger. Use objects. Do short dramatizations. The body helps the brain lock in abstract logic. For math, build stories with characters. For science, run tiny experiments. A cup of water, a balloon, a shadow. For reading, turn pages into maps. Where are we in the story? Draw the character's map. Use songs and rhymes for grammar and vocabulary. Keep the element of surprise. Change rules, swap roles, offer symbolic rewards, a teacher for 5 minutes certificate. Curiosity is the engine. Your job is to keep it burning with small, manageable failures that provoke questions, not with pre-cooked answers. Think long-term. Transformative education isn't a magic trick. It's a habit of connection. Listen to the questions children ask and answer with another question that forces them to build meaning. If a child asks why 3 times in a row, you have a gold mine. Let them lead the experiment. Take notes, drawings, marks, and at the end, ask them to summarize in 1 simple sentence. Track progress with a wall of small wins. Not cold grades, but entries like, "Today I explained why the moon looks bigger." Those records become emotional fuel. The child sees their trail of progress and wants to keep going. And you, as the teacher, must be vigilant. Every word you say is liquid that molds beliefs. Finally, be radically present. Teaching well requires listening, eye to eye, distraction-free, with questions that provoke thinking. When the child explains, don't finish their sentences. Wait through the silence. That's where the brain knits connections. When they fail, turn the mistake into a stage for inquiry. Interesting. Shall we test hypothesis X? Be a partner in discovery, not a judge. Remember, there are incredible ways to teach that turn disinterest into passion. The Feynman technique applied to a child is simple. Choose what to teach, simplify it, ask the child to teach it back, identify where they stumble, and repeat with a new example. If you do this every day with joy and attention, there's a real chance they'll become interested in anything. Start today. Take their hand, point at an object, and say, "Teach me this." You might be opening the door to an extraordinary future. When a child says, "I don't want to," pause for a second and treat it as a clue, not a challenge. Say in a calm, curious voice, "I hear you. Tell me why you don't want to do this right now." Validating isn't giving in. It opens the door to conversation. Resistance is almost always fear, tiredness, or the feeling that the task is impossible. Instead of pushing, offer a reduction. Just 2 minutes. Then you decide. The 2-minute rule works like magic. It lowers the barrier and creates a real chance for engagement. If they say, "It's boring," don't argue. Make a practical change. Offer 2 controlled options. Do you want to draw this or teach it to someone? And always pick the option that preserves learning. Autonomy reduces resistance. Another immediate tactic. Turn the activity into a quick experiment. Let's just test this like scientists. Make a hypothesis in 30 seconds. Kids love testing hypotheses. Being a scientist becomes a game. In daily practice, have go-to phrases at the ready. If a child says, "I don't want to," respond, "Okay, tell me which part bothers you." If they say it's hard, ask, "Which little part is hard? The words, the idea, or the drawing?" If a parent questions you, say, "I understand. Want to see a 5-minute demo now?" These short phrases steer the conversation toward action, not debate. Use micro-rewards and social roles. Offer a sticker for effort, or turn the learner into the teacher for 3 minutes. Often the child who resists just wants to prove they can. Giving them the teacher role activates pride and reduces pushback. If resistance persists, break the task into 30 to 60-second steps and celebrate the smallest effort. You started. That's already courage. Document quickly. Take a fast photo of the child explaining and ask for 1 sentence. "Today I taught," in 2 weeks, show this material to parents or administration. Simple evidence defeats skepticism. Finally, memorize 3 lines that always work. Validation plus question. "I understand. Why do you prefer not to do this now?" Reduction plus choice. Just 2 minutes. Or would you rather do it later? You decide. Light challenge plus role. Teach me just 1 part. If you don't like it, we stop. Never force a child to do something they don't want to do. Stop. Calmly ask, "Why don't you want to do this now?" And really listen. The answer is the clue to adapt the activity. Rather than impose, offer choices, shrink the task, and turn it into a game or role until interest emerges. That's how you teach with respect, effectiveness, and joy, and create learning that lasts. If you found this method useful, subscribe now so you don't miss the next videos. Here, practice beats theory. Leave a like if you found it helpful, and comment below what you'll try first. Write 1 line, or share a result. I read everything. Share this with a teacher, parent, or caregiver who needs it. Tag someone who will put it into practice. Hit the bell to get the next micro sessions and ready-made lesson scripts. Let's turn curiosity into habit. See you in the...
You drop a cup, it shatters on the floor, and then you wait. You wait for the pieces to jump back together, fly up into your hand, and become a cup again. You're going to be waiting a long time. This is so obvious that it sounds stupid to even say it. Of course broken cups don't reassemble themselves. Of course spilled milk doesn't flow back into the glass. But here's the thing that should bother you. Why not? No, seriously, why not? Because if you look at the laws of physics, all of them, the laws of gravity, electricity, magnetism, nuclear forces, every single one of them works perfectly well in reverse. Run the movie backwards and the physics still makes sense. A planet orbiting the sun? Film it, reverse it, and it's still a valid orbit. The physics doesn't care which direction time goes. Every collision of atoms, every interaction of particles, It all works forwards and backwards equally well. So if all the fundamental laws are reversible, why is the world so obviously not? We remember the past. We don't remember the future. Think about that. We have memories of yesterday, last year, our childhood. But the future? Nothing. Blank. We can guess. We can predict. We can hope. But we don't remember it. We feel like we can affect the future. We make choices. We take actions. We try to change what's going to happen. But the past? It's done. Fixed. You can regret it. You can feel remorse about it. But you can't change it. This difference between past and future is so built into our experience that we barely notice it. But it's strange. It's really strange. Because the atoms don't know the difference. And now, you might think there must be some law somewhere in physics that says time only goes forward. Some rule that says particles can only move this way, not that way. Some fundamental principle that makes the past different from the future. But we haven't found it. After centuries of looking, we haven't found any law that distinguishes past from future. The equations work both ways. So where does the arrow of time come from? Let me show you something. Take a box. Divide it in half with a partition. Put white gas molecules on one side, black gas molecules on the other. Now remove the partition. What happens? The gases mix, obviously. The white molecules drift into the black side, the black molecules drift into the white side, and pretty soon you have a uniform gray mixture everywhere. Now, if you wait long enough, will the gases ever unmix? Will all the white molecules ever spontaneously go back to one side, and all the black molecules go back to the other? Technically, yes. It's possible. The laws of physics allow it. If every single molecule happened to be moving in exactly the right direction, at exactly the right speed, they could all end up separated again. But the chances of this happening are so small, so incredibly tiny, that you would have to wait longer than the age of the universe. Much, much longer. The number of years you'd have to wait has more digits than there are atoms in the observable universe. So it's not going to happen. Or push a heavy block across the floor. It slides, slows down, and stops. The friction between the block and the floor brings it to rest. Now wait. Wait for the block to suddenly start moving again. Wait for the floor to push it back toward your hand. You're going to be waiting forever. The energy of the moving block didn't disappear. Energy never disappears. It transformed. It became heat. The friction warmed up the floor, just a tiny bit. The organized motion of the block, all those atoms moving together in the same direction, became disorganized motion. Atoms in the floor jiggling randomly in all directions. That's entropy. Right there, in a sliding block. The organized motion became disorganized motion. The energy spread out. The information about which direction things were moving got lost in the chaos of random thermal jiggling. Every time you see friction, every time something slows down and stops, you're watching entropy increase. You're watching organized motion become disorganized heat. You're watching the arrow of time in action. Your car brakes. Entropy increases. A ball bouncing lower and lower until it stops. Entropy increases. A pendulum slowly coming to rest. Entropy increases. It's everywhere. It's constant. It's relentless. But why? Why doesn't the block ever slide back? Why don't the gases unmix? Each individual molecule is just bouncing around randomly. There's nothing stopping any particular molecule from going left or right. So why don't they ever all go to one side? It's about counting. It's about the number of ways things can be arranged. Think of it this way. You shuffle a deck of cards. What are the chances that after shuffling, all the hearts are together, all the diamonds are together, all the clubs are together, and all the spades are together? Almost zero. Not because any particular arrangement is forbidden. Any specific arrangement of 52 cards is equally unlikely. But there's only one way to have them perfectly sorted, and there are billions and billions of ways to have them mixed up. So when you shuffle, you almost certainly go from order to disorder. Not because of any fundamental law, but because there are so many more ways to be disordered than to be ordered. And that's entropy. Entropy is, you can think of it as a measure of disorder. But more precisely, it's a measure of how many different microscopic arrangements could produce the same macroscopic appearance. When the gas is separated, white on one side, black on the other, There's only a limited number of ways the molecules can be arranged while still looking separated. But when it's all mixed together, there are astronomically more arrangements that all look the same, gray everywhere. So the gas mixes not because mixing is a law of physics, but because there are vastly more mixed states than unmixed states. It's just probability. Overwhelming, crushing, inevitable probability. Now watch this. The laws of physics don't have a direction, but probability does. Probability says you almost always go from less likely states to more likely states, from fewer arrangements to more arrangements, from order to disorder. And that's where the arrow of time comes from. The past is when there was more order. The future is when there will be less order. We remember the past because our brains record information, and recording information requires order. We can't remember the future because it hasn't been ordered yet. Let me put it another way. Every time you break an egg, you're increasing the entropy of the universe. The egg had order, shell intact, yolk in place, everything arranged just so. The broken egg has less order, pieces scattered, yolk spreading, chaos. Could the egg unbreak? Could all those pieces fly back together and reform a perfect egg? In principle, yes. Every atom could reverse its motion. But the chances are so impossibly small that it will never happen in the lifetime of the universe. So the egg stays broken, and time moves forward. This is profound. Really think about this. The difference between past and future, this thing that feels so fundamental to our existence, it doesn't come from the laws of physics at all. It comes from statistics. It comes from counting. It comes from the simple fact that there are more ways to be messy than to be neat. Every moment of your life, you're riding the wave of increasing entropy. Every breath you take, every thought you think, every action you perform, it all increases the disorder of the universe just a little bit. And that's why time has a direction. But wait, there's a problem. If entropy always increases, if everything always moves toward disorder, then why is there any order at all? Why isn't the universe just a uniform gray soup of randomly scattered particles? Look around you. There are stars, galaxies, planets. There's life. There's you, sitting there with your incredibly organized brain, full of neurons firing in precise patterns. How did all this order come to exist in a universe that's supposed to be falling apart? The answer takes us back to the very beginning, the Big Bang. For some reason, and honestly we don't fully understand why, the universe started in a state of incredibly low entropy, extremely high order. Everything was packed together, organized in a very specific way. And ever since then, entropy has been increasing. The universe has been unwinding, moving from that initial order toward eventual disorder. So when you see a star burning in the sky, you're not seeing order being created from nothing. You're seeing the slow release of the order that was built into the universe from the beginning. The star is spending the cosmic inheritance, you might say. Think about it this way. Imagine you have a giant spring, wound up incredibly tight. That's the early universe, full of potential, full of stored order. And everything that has happened since, every galaxy forming, every star igniting, every planet cooling, every life form evolving, it's all just the spring unwinding. We're living off the low entropy of the past. Now you might ask, if the laws of physics are reversible, couldn't we argue that the future also has low entropy? Couldn't we say that the universe will eventually wind back up again? No, and here's why. Suppose you're looking at a box of gas that's half mixed, some white molecules, some black molecules, kind of swirled together but not completely uniform. Now I ask you, what was this gas doing a few minutes ago? And what will it be doing a few minutes from now? If you assume the mixing happened by accident, by random fluctuation, then the most likely answer is that it was more mixed before and it will be more mixed after. The current partial separation is just a temporary fluctuation, and the gas is on its way back to being fully mixed. But that's not what we observe. We observe that the past had more order and the future has less. The gas was separated before, and it will be fully mixed after. This tells us something crucial. The order we see in the world is not due to random fluctuations. It's not an accident. It's a memory of an initial state of very high order. Suppose you look at one corner of a room and you see some order. Maybe the gas molecules there happen to be arranged in an unusual pattern. If this order came from a random fluctuation, then you would expect the rest of the room to be completely disordered. The fluctuation would be local. But when astronomers point their telescopes at new parts of the sky, parts they've never looked at before, they find order there too. Stars burning, galaxies spinning, the same patterns everywhere. This tells us the order is not a fluctuation. The order is universal. It came from the beginning. So the entire arrow of time, the entire distinction between past and future, traces back to one fact. The universe started with low entropy. Everything else follows from that. Why do we remember the past but not the future? Because memories are records, and records require order. The low entropy of the past allows records to be formed. The high entropy of the future doesn't. The whole structure of our experience, cause and effect, memory and anticipation, birth and death, it all traces back to entropy. The Big Bang wasn't just an explosion. It was an explosion of order, a release of potential. And everything that has happened since, every star, every planet, every life form, every thought you've ever had, is riding that wave of increasing entropy. We don't know why the universe started that way. We don't know what set up those initial conditions. It remains one of the great mysteries. But we do know this: the arrow of time points from low entropy to high entropy, from order to disorder, from the past to the future, and there's no escaping it. Now, people sometimes get confused. They look around and they see order. They see crystals forming. They see plants growing. They see babies being born and developing into complex adults. And they ask, doesn't life violate entropy? Aren't living things becoming more ordered over time, not less? No, life doesn't violate entropy, not even close. Yes, a growing plant becomes more ordered. Yes, a developing embryo becomes more complex. Yes, your brain is an incredibly organized structure. But none of this happens for free. To grow, a plant absorbs sunlight. That sunlight is low entropy energy, organized, concentrated, coming from one direction. The plant uses that energy to build its structures, and in the process, it radiates heat back into the environment. That heat is high entropy energy, disorganized, spread out, going in all directions. The total entropy, plant plus environment, increases, always. You are the same way. You eat food. Food is organized, complex molecules arranged in specific patterns. Your body breaks down that food, extracts the useful energy, builds and repairs your tissues, and in the process, you radiate heat. You exhale carbon dioxide. You produce waste. The order in your body is borrowed. It comes from the order in your food, which came from the order in sunlight, which came from the order in the sun, which came from the order in the gas cloud that formed the sun, which came from the Big Bang. So you are not fighting entropy, you are surfing it. Life is not a violation of the second law of thermodynamics. Life is a particularly interesting way of increasing entropy. We are entropy increasing machines that happen to be conscious. Think about that for a moment. Every breath you take increases the entropy of the universe. Every thought you think, because thinking requires energy, and energy use produces heat, increases the entropy of the universe. Every moment you're alive, you're contributing to the great unwinding. But along the way, along this process of increasing entropy, you get to experience things. You get to think. You get to wonder. You get to love and create and discover. Life is what entropy looks like when it gets complicated. And the order that makes you possible, the low entropy that allows your existence, it's not just from yesterday's breakfast. It traces back through an unbroken chain, back through the food chain, back through the ecosystem, back through the formation of the earth, back through the ignition of the sun, back through the collapse of gas clouds, back through the formation of the first stars, back, all the way back to whatever happened at the beginning. You are connected to the origin of the universe, not metaphorically, physically. The arrow of time that runs through you is the same arrow that runs through everything. The entropy that governs your life is the same entropy that governs the stars. When we study physics, we study the fundamental laws, the equations that govern particles and forces and fields. And these laws are beautiful, they're elegant, they're reversible, but they don't tell the whole story. The laws tell you what can happen. They don't tell you what does happen. For that, you need initial conditions. You need to know where things started. And the arrow of time, the distinction between past and future, comes from those initial conditions, not from the laws themselves. This is a profound distinction. The laws are eternal and symmetric. The world is temporal and asymmetric. The difference comes from history, not from physics. We often think of physics as telling us what the world is. But really, physics tells us what the world can be. The world itself, with all its complexity and history and direction, is one particular realization of those possibilities, one particular path through the space of what's allowed. Why this path? Why these initial conditions? Why this arrow of time? We don't know. Maybe we'll figure it out someday. Maybe we won't. But the question itself, the question of why the universe is the way it is, rather than some other way, that question is part of what makes physics so fascinating. We're not just cataloging facts. We're trying to understand why reality is real, why things happen, why time flows, why we're here at all. Now, some people find this depressing. The universe is winding down. Everything falls apart eventually. Every structure, no matter how beautiful or complex, will ultimately dissolve into chaos. But I don't see it that way. Think about what it means to be alive right now. You exist in this narrow window, this brief era between the ordered past and the disordered future, when complexity is possible, when stars can burn, when planets can form, when molecules can arrange themselves into living things. You are not separate from this process. You are this process. You are entropy increasing in a particularly interesting way. So when I say we're all going to the same place, I mean it literally. Every structure dissolves. Every order becomes disorder. Every complex thing eventually falls apart. Stars burn out. Planets cool. Life ends. Civilizations crumble. Eventually, given enough time, the universe reaches maximum entropy, heat death, equilibrium. Nothing more happening ever again. But don't let that make you sad. The fact that entropy increases, the fact that time moves forward, the fact that everything eventually ends, this is not a flaw in the universe. This is what makes the universe interesting. Without increasing entropy, nothing would happen. There would be no change, no flow, no story, just static equilibrium, forever. The arrow of time is what gives us moments. The march toward disorder is what gives us events. The slow unwinding of the cosmic spring is what gives us everything. You exist because entropy increases. You experience time because entropy increases. You can make choices and have effects because entropy increases. So, yes, we're all going to the same place. But the journey is everything. And right now, you're on it. You are made of atoms that were forged in ancient stars. You are organized by patterns that trace back to the beginning of time. You are conscious in a universe that is mostly not. And for this brief flicker, this tiny window between the ordered past and the disordered future, you get to be here. The universe is winding down. But right now, in this moment, it's still wound up enough for you to exist, for you to think, for you to ask questions about why anything is the way it is. That's not tragedy. That's something, isn't it? The arrow only points one way, and that's what makes every moment matter.